The Michael Waddell Podcast is presented by Spandau Arms in partnership with Folds of Honor, Spartan Magnaswitch System, Cigars International, and Texas Trophy Hunters Association. Be sure to like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts.
At this point, I'm going, I am tired of this. I reached up, grabbed that barrel at the end of it, slung it back behind me, threw it at the dead turkey. Almost hit the turkey.
Yeah, the shotgun comes flying in, helicoptering in, looked like one of your helicopter crashes, and then the turkey just runs off through the mesquite.
Finally figured out there's something going on. Maybe you shouldn't be.
We laugh. I was like, that. How cool is that? My first experience to hunt with Larry Weishuhn, and we couldn't get the gun to shoot. Larry Weishuhn, welcome to the show, buddy.
Michael Waddell, what an absolute pleasure to be back with you again.
I know, man. It's been way too long. I run into you at the Dallas Safari Club last year, and it was honestly like seeing my uncle. I'm like, man, I was hugging you like I was hugging all over you. I introduced my wife, and of course, you got here last night. We had some good catch up, and here you are on the show. So,
lots of memories returned, and I'll tell you what. After I went to bed, I got thinking about, we didn't talk about this, we didn't talk about that. We need to talk about that sometime, whether we do it today or we do it some other times.
I know it, and today will be fine because I don't think people realize really how long, well, a lot of people do, but for those who are listening, and I do want to take a little time and read some of the stuff. You've won the Lifetime Achievement Award when it comes to hunting. Obviously, your work with Dallas Safari Club, a whitetail biologist, and I noticed on your bio it says 6 decades of work, and I thought that's a good way of putting it that don't make you feel so old at all. 6 decades, that's 60 years, and that's...
You notice all this white hair.
It used to be red
when you and I met. So. But I earned every one of those red hair turning white.
You earned them. You earned them. And I just want to read to the listeners and people watching a little bit about Larry. I feel like I could quote this off the top of my head, but Larry's too humble to read this or to talk about it. But Larry Weishuhn, he is fondly known as Mr. Whitetail. That's certainly what I always thought of you of. And you've been a cornerstone of the hunting conservation community for over 6 decades. Humble beginnings. You were just a wild-eyed kid exploring the wilds of Colorado County, Texas.
Yes, sir.
And had a celebrated career. And this is what's cool to me. So many people in our industry are just hunters. I mean, Larry, that's just one of the probably smallest contributing thing that you felt come with what you've had a chance to do. And we're so blessed, I know, to get a chance to hunt. But you've been an author, a television host. You're a wildlife biologist. You went to Texas A&M. You worked down there and got your degrees. You've been working in this biology in Texas, but now spread all across the country. So Mr. Whitetail is very, very fitting. And so I could go on forever, but I know early in my career, I read so many articles, books, and I had a chance to meet you. I think it was around 1994, 95.
It was, yes, sir.
In Texas, which is when I think of Larry Weishuhn, I think of Texas and rattling them bucks and shooting them with pistols. And so that was cool, man.
Well, I remember this skinny little kid that showed up. His name was Michael Waddell. And the one thing I've always appreciated about you, the Michael Waddell that I met then is the same Michael Waddell I'm sitting across from right now. You have not changed in that respect, and I truly appreciate you for being that way.
Well, thank you, and likewise.
You could be one of those guys who walks around with his nose up in the air and doesn't say very much to anybody unless they really want to talk. And then they have to pay you for it.
Well, the good news is because I had people like you in my life that I know would have knocked me out. Y'all would have made my nose. It wouldn't have been turned up. It would have been turned to the left or right from a right hook, you know. But God, it's crazy. I mean, how does it feel now, Larry, to look back? Because you're talking, like I said, 6 decades. That ain't even counting your childhood of running up down the creeks in Texas and obviously knowing that you was probably eat up with wildlife in general, not just deer. I mean, I feel like
chiggers and ticks and mosquitoes and all those other things, you know. It's interesting to look back. I've been so very fortunate, so very blessed over the years to have met so many great people such as yourselves and a few others who really helped. And you mentioned the Mr. Whitetail thing. That actually started when J. Wayne Fears wrote an article back in 1984 for a Harris publication, and he was writing about people who hunted quite a bit of whitetail deer, but I'd also done the biologist stuff and about the guns that we used. And in that article and on the cover of that particular annual, they mentioned me as Mr. Whitetail. And that's where all that started. You and somebody said, "What's this Mr. Whitetail thing?" I said, "Oh, golly, they caught me with my britches down." Because I obviously had red hair, I was very white kind of thing.
Right.
But, looking back over the years, so many things have changed in so many different ways. And one of the things that I learned very early in life and very early in my career that you have to learn to adapt. When writing was king, there was a time when there were no TV shows. It was pretty much outdoor life, field and stream, sports field, and a few other publications. There were no North American Whitetail, no deer hunting, any of those kind of publications. When I first started, writing was king. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the advertisers, that's where all the advertising dollars went. And then TV started coming along with TNN and some of the shows, which is some of the Realtree shows and Bass Pro and some of the others that we did. And money started siphoning off. Well, I saw that and I thought, man, maybe I kind of got to get into this TV thing, not forgetting about the writing or the wildlife biologist side of things. But we continually evolved to where a few years ago, somebody said blog, podcast, and everybody just kind of looked up at the sky and go, what in the heck are they talking about? But you have to learn to adapt in this field. And it's been so great to watch people like you come along, deal with some of the old friends that I dealt with, and, always looking for new things to do as well, too. Done a lot of radio, done a lot of writing, done the books, do a lot of public speaking, particularly in terms of trying to promote wildlife conservation and how important hunting is to the fact that we have animals today. And if we want to have animals in the future, we have to have hunting as well, too. So all that's been a very, very important thing, but it's been interesting watching things change from when we first started doing TV shows. We carried around Beta Cam SPs. They weighed 30, 40 pounds. We had a recorder that weighed another 10 pounds. We had batteries that weighed another 30 pounds, and you carried a tripod that weighed 150 because that was the only thing that could support the darn thing.
That's why I was That's why I was skinny.
That's why you were skinny.
Yeah.
And today, I mean, now, we can probably get better stuff off our phones than we could when we were doing all that other kind of thing. So that's been an interesting thing to do and watch the evolution in terms of whitetail deer. When I was a kid growing up, we didn't have very many whitetail deer. Grew up out west of Houston, used to be about 80, 90 miles. Now I think it's about 20 miles from here.
Right.
We didn't have very many deer. We got rid of the screwworm flies, and deer population started increasing. And all of a sudden, deer also became an economic value, had an economic value. And we really watched that change from just being a deer hunter to being more knowledgeable in terms of whitetail deer and their habitat and all those kind of things.
Is most of this happening in the 70s or 60s, late 60s, 70s?
It happened in the 70s is really when it did. And there's a lot of guys out there that want to take credit for, I'm the one who started the whitetail deer industry, as we know. There are two people that were really responsible, actually kind of maybe four. Two people, it was John Wooders. John Wooders was a writer from Texas. Jerry Smith was a photographer from Texas. Mm-hmm. Up until that time, Lenny Lee LaRue was the guru when it came to taking deer pictures. But poor Lenny never had a chance to take a picture of a deer that was older than 2 years old. Right.
Wasn't it mostly Michigan and Pennsylvania?
New York, Pennsylvania, and that's where most of those deer pictures came from. Well, they never got a chance to get any older than that. Jerry Smith started photographing deer down in deep South Texas, down on the King Ranch, where there were a lot of good deer, and they had a chance to get some age on it. Well, about the same time, Wooders started writing about mature deer. And it was those two that really kind of opened the door from a general public perspective. And then two very dear friends, biologist friends, Al Brothers and Murphy Ray, wrote a book called Producing Quality Whitetail, which kind of for the longest term served as the Bible, if you will, of deer management that took into consideration making sure the habitat was good, they got plenty to eat on a daily basis, and they got to have some age on them kind of thing. Those are the four guys, really, when you get right down to it. And there's a lot of guys that came along afterwards that, organizations such as Texas Trophy Hunter Association, the North American Whitetail TV, that was turned into the TV show, but the magazine that was started really by David and two of his partners. And Oh, it's been interesting, though, watching that progression grow as we have over the last many years. And people really paying attention to the needs of white-tailed deer. And one of the things that we learned along the way as a biologist is that when we improve the habitat for, say, white-tailed deer or turkey or quail or doves or elk or you name the species, whenever we improve the quality of the habitat for them, the habitat had diversity. And when you have a habitat diversity in terms of vegetation, then you have all the little butterflies and little bugs and all those other kind of things. And it really went to prove that if we manage for the game animals, it's actually the habitat and the non-game species, if you will, that benefit a whole lot more from it.
True. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's been interesting watching this kind of thing evolve over a period of time.
When it gets so technical, you can look back and just think about habitat. Basically, if you didn't go past that alone, if you got food, cover, water, essentially everything starts thriving.
It did.
To a degree, yeah.
It did. And it continues to do so in a lot of different ways. And that's, again, then you got to control the animals through hunting. So hunting plays a real important role. And we as hunters pay for the conservation of all the different species that are out there.
Very true. And going back, Larry, so, you're back in the 60s, those early 70s. What is it, do you think? Obviously, you graduated from Texas A&M, got a degree in whitetail biology, and I think it was another degree. You had a couple.
No, I've just got a degree in wildlife management.
Wildlife management, okay.
But I was very fortunate to be involved I went to work under contract with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the Department of Veterinary Pathology.
Was that right out of college?
That was while I was still in college.
Okay.
With the Wildlife Disease Project, and then worked for them, and then worked for the state, and then, of course, went on to private industry kind of thing as well, too. But, again, during those days, it was a total learning process from the word go. We were learning about the importance of nutrition and what deer actually needed and what they ate and all those kind of things during those, starting and probably in about the early 60s, but then it really kind of reached a pivotal point in the early 70s.
I got
middle
you.
70s.
What was it when obviously you become an author, you started writing all those publications that you just named? That's where I first saw your name, from Field and Stream. I remember I read articles in North American Whitetail, Outdoor Life, and those were for every country kid. But not even country people. If you saw Outdoor Life, I mean, there was a lot of people, you going through an airport or at the convenience store, every place that was your avenue into understand how to build a fort, what a whitetail deer looked like.
Exactly.
New habits, new ways you could go about hunting them and other species you might be interested in, whether it be elk, quail, whatever. Where was it that you said, okay, I got this biology degree, I'm working at Parks and Wildlife. Where did the trajectory go to get you to kind of where you're sitting today?
The writing thing was an interesting thing because I grew up out in the country and spent all my time outdoors and had an uncle that subscribed to those publications that we mentioned, Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, and Field and Stream, and Sports Field. And those were the primary ones at that time. Well, I read all those stories, and from the time that I was a little kid that I could read, and even before, when I could just see pictures, I'd look at a moose, which is hanging up there. One of these days, I'm going to go shoot a moose.
Yeah.
Or somebody had killed a nice deer, and a nice deer was an 8-point that now we would go, yeah, it's a pretty good yearling, he's safe kind of thing. And seeing those, and it just started there, and I always loved to read, so I wanted to write as well too. Guys like Jack O'Connor and a little bit later on Grits Gresham and Warren Page and a bunch of those other guys of that era. Those were my heroes, and so I wanted to write, and I was fortunate enough to where I could put 3 or 4 words together. And I actually sold my first outdoor magazine article with the cover of some work that we were doing with desert bighorn sheep back in about 1970. So that's how many years ago?
There we go. we're into the. Let's not count too hard, right? Let's start not counting too hard.
Decades right there, but those were, like I said, those guys were my heroes, and I wanted to be as much as I could like them, but I loved the biology side of it as well too. And I worked I was very fortunate. I worked statewide, got to do so many different things through the Wildlife Disease Project, and worked with almost every species that we had in Texas, from white-tailed deer to alligators to desert bighorn sheep, mule deer, pronghorn, some of the exotics, all those kind of things. And went to work for the state, and I spent 5 years after several other things, as a technical assistance biologist, setting up management programs with ranchers and hunters all throughout South Texas. And that's where we started the helicopter thing years ago.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, and was there, and my wife and I were living in Bayville, and I got a call one morning from Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Up to that point, I'd done a fair amount of writing for the department, and they only wanted you to write for them, but also did a little bit of ghost writing, if you will, too.
Right.
So I got a call one morning from the head office in Austin and said, "Man, Larry, we got great news. We've created a position for you here at the Austin office. You know, we want you up here within the month." Oh my God, that's absolutely fantastic. I hung the phone up.
But you had to move to Austin,
I was
right?
going to have to move to Austin.
Okay.
So I hung the phone up. My wife came in. She says, "Who was that?" And I told her who it was with the TPWD there in Austin. I said, "I'm quitting the state." And she said, "You're doing what?" I says, "I'm quitting." She says, "Did they fire you?" And I go, "No." I said, "But they just as well have, because they've created a position in Austin where I'm going to be at a desk job the rest of my career." And I said, "So that's it. We're quitting." And we did. And by then I was doing a little bit more writing and gotten to know a few other people. And at the same time, I'd been working with a lot of different ranchers, and they wanted a lot more work done on their properties than I could do as a biologist for the state. So I set up my own consulting work and started writing. And that's just one thing.
So that was probably the pivotal point.
That was the pivotal
because
point.
now you're in a place, I'm assuming this, where you had a solid weekly paycheck. You know, your family's budgeting on that. I know you had a young family, or you know.
I did. I had 2 daughters.
So now it's like, it wasn't like I'm trying to be Mr. Whitetail. I'm trying to provide a biscuit for my family,
I'm
right?
trying to provide. Hunger is a great motivator. And it's amazing the things that you do, you know, to do that. But I was fortunate too. By then I'd been established pretty much throughout the southern part of Texas and other parts of Texas as well. And my consulting business did very well. I spent a lot of time in helicopters starting in about August and crawling out about time deer season opened in November, and then crawling back in right after Christmas. And we'd fly those ranches until usually about the middle of March, because our bucks then some of them started losing their antlers.
And on the helicopter surveys, y'all were trying to get a head count for as much of the wildlife as you could, I'm assuming.
We did. The beauty of the helicopter was in a day's flying time, and we'd fly adjacent transects and count deer, but also look at the quail populations, look at the predator populations, look at the vegetation, look at the grazing practices, look where there need to be water, where you might want to put in a stock tank, or maybe where you want to put in cross fences or do some brush work. All those were part of that, doing the helicopter survey. But yes, we were looking primarily at bucks, does, and fawns to come up with an idea as to what can we harvest without affecting this herd in a negative manner or in any way adversely, but also improve the quality of that animal in terms of body weight, which would equate in terms of health, which equates to better antlers.
Right.
So that was a big part of that as well, too.
That's cool. And I know, too, like, obviously, them helicopters, how high on average would you be?
We were, our brush in South Texas is probably about 20 to 25 feet tall at the most.
Right.
So generally we were flying at a level of probably about 40 to 50 feet.
So you're talking just over.
We're skimming the brush is what it amounted to.
And I remember you had told me one time you've been in quite a few helicopter crashes. I don't think you call it an accident. It's just a crash.
It's just a crash. It's a crash.
How many of those?
Well, it's a question whether helicopters were meant to fly at all or not. And for the most part, we used to fly. If anybody's ever watched the MASH TV show, which was popular many years ago, those are little Bell 47s.
Those little bubble. So you had a lot of visibility out of them. They're small.
And so those were the ones that we flew. And over the years, until I quit doing helicopter surveys, there were 13 different crashes.
What the heck?
13's a lucky number.
It must be. I was mentioning some of this to my young son, who's 9, and we were talking about the amount of helicopter crashes, and he was like, "Dad, you think Mr. Larry would have decided after the second or third that maybe I shouldn't get back up in a helicopter?" And we started laughing about that. Holy cow. And what was some of the worst one? I mean, obviously, some of them probably worse than others. Had to be. You're sitting here. So.
Well, I'm very fortunate. Over the years, I've had several friends who lost their lives, who are paralyzed either from their neck down or waist down as a result of helicopter crashes. But good Lord, always took seemingly care of fools and me in those instances. But the first one, we were down, we used to hunt the Encinitas ranches.
That's where I first met
exactly.
you. Yeah, the Encinitas
Well, just
Ranch.
north of there a little way was the Jones Ranch. We were flying there, and I always sat on the right side and the pilot on the left side. And I saw a deer come out from some what we call motte country, or just little chunks of bushes and then tall grasses and all that. And I happened to just turn around and look to the right real quick when I saw this movement underneath me. And as I did, I saw those were Lycoming engines. I saw a piston come flying out of it.
So out of your peripheral, you see a piston come?
No, I just happened to actually turn and see it coming out because I was looking to see where that deer had gone. This piston came flying out, and I mean, immediately I see there's oil and fire and stuff coming out, and we hit the ground pretty hard right there. But
yeah.
But a lot of people, time you hear people talking about, well, can't you auto rotate? Because what that is, auto rotation is being up, and you have the blades at a certain pitch, and just right before you hit the ground, you switch the pitch of that blade so you soften. You can do that when you're 500 feet up in the air.
Not when you're 30, 40
foot. 40 feet. It's like, thump.
This is deer stand. You're about as high as a deer stand.
Exactly. And it happened really, really quick. And I mean, we hit the ground and just stopped for just a second. Pieces were still pretty much there in that instance. And the pilot, Don, and I ended up having to walk like 13 miles because back then we didn't have telephones. That was to the nearest house and go, you might want to send another helicopter down. This one is not going to be flying today.
Yeah, because those ranches were huge. I remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember Encinitas was like a 45,000 acre ranch.
It's 45,000 acres. And a lot of those ranches down there were of that large size. They kind of go back to some of the Spanish land grant type thing. And a lot of that country could not support a cow to maybe a cow to 40 to 50 acres. And so if you're going to run any appreciable number of cattle, you need to have a pretty good sized place. That was one of the reasons. But the other reason was that a lot of that went back to the Spanish land grant of granting to this individual who helped so many leagues of land.
And I remember I had never been on land that large. And I remember going to the Encinitas and hearing it said it's 45,000 acres. Of course, this is before, the Spartan Forge apps and stuff that you can put on your phone and look and see exactly where you're at. Again, there was no cell phones.
No.
And I remember I'd always grew up hunting, 100, 200 acre, maybe a 500 acre tract was a big land in the Southeast.
Yes. Same here.
God, and they turned me loose out there turkey hunting. And I remember we had some guys from Bass Pro Shops that I was guiding. Before I know it, I got turned around, and all that country looks the same. Once you get out in that mesquite brush, man, I was so lost, and I had too much pride to tell the guys I was lost, and I just kept thinking, this is 45,000 acres. Sooner or later, I got to hit a road and just pray it's a road that I knew because I'd only been out there 2 days.
Right.
And I remember that country was real sandy, like walking on a beach. I'd never been so exhausted, needless to say. And we ended up, there was 2 guys with me. We killed turkeys. So now we had the 2 turkeys we're toting.
So now you carried 2 turkeys as well, too.
The 2 turkeys that we killed covered me for a little while, but I run into them completely by accident trying to get back to somewhere I knew. And I never told them, but I remember when we got back finally to the truck or the rental car, he was like, I tell you what, Waddell. I remember it was a manager of a Bass Pro Shops, and he said, man, I appreciate how hard you hunt. He said, we put on the miles. And I never did tell him that we were lost. I was planning on being back at breakfast. We had breakfast at 9:30, 10. Always had a good Mexican. And anyway, I was like, I appreciate it, man. Put a lot of effort in. And I was like, the whole time there's enough turkeys there. If you get lost, you're going to run into a turkey.
That was the darndest turkey population that you could ever imagine. It was not uncommon to see 300 or 400 gobblers during the wintertime, when it was there during deer season.
How many? So you would say it wouldn't be uncommon when you're on those surveys in that Texas region to see hundreds of turkeys,
if not thousands
of turkeys.
Of turkeys, yeah.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
What's the most you think you've ever seen, like doing deer surveys in the winter? or summer?
What we used to do is the winter roost counts to get an idea.
So you would go and try to get a count on the turkeys?
We'd try to get a count on a winter roost. And, of course, in Texas, there's a lot of places you have traditional winter roosts where they come back. We'd walk underneath those big old pecan trees or oak trees, and there'd be droppings 6-8 feet tall.
Holy
just piles
cow.
of it. You think about that. But traditionally, you'd have the gobblers roost in one area and the hens roost in another area. But there was an area for a long time south of Abilene that we used to count turkeys on, near Coleman, Texas, on the Colorado River.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that country is relatively short brush, but then you have big trees, big roost trees on the river itself. And we'd go down there with 6 or 8 of us, and we'd go, okay, you count from this bend to this bend, and okay, you count from here to here. And when it was all said and done, and we'd get back in that night, we were counting individual birds that we could count. We'd be upwards of 30,000.
Oh my goodness! I mean,
and what used to be fun is there was a bridge on the river, and if you drove there in that bridge on the river and got out and blew the horn or slammed the car door, I mean, it would be shock gobbling as far, and you could hear it just go all the way, and it disappear, and then it'd get to, I guess, somewhere near the end, and then it'd start all over again, and it'd come back to you. It was amazing, the number of birds.
So that explains why if you're from the South, Alabama, Georgia, come out to Texas, you kill a couple of turkeys and beat your chest, talk about a great turkey hunter you are, they look at you, the Texans look at you like, big deal, man, I counted 30,000 this past winter.
I used to get tickled because we'd have turkey symposiums, and we'd have biologists come in from some of the other states, and they'd tell, man, we have got a lot of turkeys. I saw 20 birds the other day, and I go, oh man, that's fantastic. I said, would y'all like to go look at some country and let me show you what our turkey habitat looks like? And they go, oh my God, we'd love to. Well, I'd take them to different areas, and I'd show them over 1,000 birds, just a little bit at a time, just driving some of the roads of where you see a flock over here of 100 and a flock over there of 30 and 50 and whatever, And
what's funny is people could hear this, especially all my Southern brothers who turkey hunting is such a huge deal in the South. I mean, it's big everywhere now, even in Texas. Obviously, There's a lot of people who love it. And a lot of those ranches, I remember early on, they looked at the turkeys as not even a resource. The deer were.
For years.
Yeah,
yes.
and so you could kind of go, basically, people would let you hunt turkeys because they were kind of just on the edge of a nuisance a little bit. And,
absolutely.
And I remember the first year I went, and David Blanton told me, and I was videoing / guiding, and I think Walter Parrott was in camp, and Joe Drake.
Oh, my gosh.
Maybe a Ricky Joe Bishop, I forget. But there was a couple of these callers that had won competitions. And anyway, David told me, he said, look, man, when you go, he said, what I try to do, if a turkey's gobbling, if you can't have the sun on him when he comes in, don't go to another one.
Right.
And I really thought, I was like, man, David is doing drugs. Like, I mean, because I'd always grew up, you're just trying to get a turkey.
A turkey.
A turkey. And quickly into it, I remember going up there, what we called the Golden Arches, which was Bill's primary place, but I figured out I could come on the backside. He was missing another 50 that was coming out the back. And sure enough, you could kind of, I mean, it would get tough. Don't get me wrong, it would get tough, but you could kind of cherry pick the turkey that was gobbling.
You really could.
And manipulate that one based on, in the day, television to get that turkey. I don't like to call a turkey into the sun because they can see, but some of the most gorgeous hunts, I remember back with those big beta cams, those turkeys were just gleaming, those big old Rios, right in the sun. And that was all David Blanton's envision. Yes. Like, look, why are we just going to try to kill a turkey? We would hunt a little harder to try to get it set up where the sun was perfect. And I realized that he wasn't exaggerating because there was that many turkeys back then. And it was just, I felt like I died and went to heaven as a turkey hunter. We're going to stop for a quick break, but please don't go anywhere. We got so much to come.
Spandau Arms was founded with a simple idea. The best part of hunting isn't the gear, it's the memories. From the first rooster rise of the season in the tall grass to the last second opportunity on the target buck as sunset closes in. Spandau believes firearms should be built to perform, priced to be accessible, and designed to become an essential piece of your hunting story. Their lineup includes field-ready shotguns and precision-driven rifles built for hunters, competitors, and recreational shooters who know that quality and dependability matter more than the hype. Born from the experience of American hunters and crafted by generations of gunmakers, each Spandau firearm is built for real-world performance in the moments that matter.
Look, I love a good cigar. I also love a campfire and stories and a little philosophical talk with my buddies in hunting camp. Like I said, nothing tops it off like a good stogie. And if you're looking for that ultimate cigar experience, Cigars International is your go-to destination for premium handmade cigars. As the industry leader, Cigars International offers the largest selection, unbeatable prices, and customer service that's second to none. Plus, free shipping every day. There's no minimums, there's no limits. Just shop, check out, and enjoy free delivery on every order. Whether you're new to cigars or a seasoned aficionado, Cigars International makes it easy, approachable, and fun with expert guides, staff reviews, and helpful advice. It's not just about cigars. They've also got cool accessories, from humidors and much more to elevate your smoking experience. Ready to light it up? Right now, you can get 20% off your order plus free shipping every day with my code Waddell. That's WADDELL at checkout, or visit cigarsinternational.com/Waddell, and the discount code will automatically apply.
Well, for years and years, we only had turkey seasons during the fall, and it wasn't until the middle 70s or so that we started having spring turkey season. I was working as a biologist at the time out of Abilene, and I got all that country, got it open to spring turkey. Up until that time, I approached the Parks and Wildlife Department back then. They go, nobody's interested in spring turkey hunting. So I got with all the ranchers that I knew, and I got them together and said, okay, we're going to farm a petition and say, we want spring turkey hunt if you want it. And they go, oh, God, we'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So I got that started, and the first turkey I killed in the spring was in 1977, and it was a three-bearded bird that I called in and shot with a, back then, I did a lot of turkey hunting seminars. You probably didn't know this, but I did a lot of turkey hunting seminars, but my weapon of choice was always a 270.
Because you could shoot with a rifle in Texas.
And you could.
And you'd shoot them at 40, 50 yards, but you...
Well, you could, but, to me, the joy was in calling them. I didn't care whether... the reason that they finally started shooting turkeys with a shotgun instead of a rifle across the country? Because they got rid of the Indians.
They got rid of the Indians.
Up until that time, a lot of people years and years ago, they hunted turkey with a rifle primarily because they needed a rifle for protection if they ran into a bunch of
That makes sense. So you were hunting you were overpowered for protection from other things, like in that case, a rogue Indian.
Yeah, or
the Comanches were pretty ruthless back then.
So that's when people started hunting with a shotgun. So that was always my excuse. But I love the calling aspect of it. And to me, if I can call one from 15, 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, what difference does it make without shooting with a rifle or a bow or shotgun, kind of thing. So.
Yeah. Which brings up that story. You need to tell that story. The first time we really hunted together, we had met, I think, the fall before, but that spring, me and you got to go turkey hunting together.
We did. We were down on the Encinitas, and Michael was there, and I knew Michael was an absolutely great caller. I mean, I'd heard you call and all that kind of thing, and I thought, so I was visiting with Bill and David, and they said, you and Michael want to go on a turkey hunt? I said, absolutely. And as you recall, we went in a totally different direction in the far southeast corner because I knew there was 2 or 3 just monster gobblers down there that I'd seen during the fall. So we get down there, we get all set up, we put up a decoy out front, and I get in front, and Michael's in behind me just a little bit with a call, and he's calling, filming, and all of a sudden, hear the gobbler, and then you hear him spitting and drumming, and you can hear his wingtips scraping the ground, and he comes dancing into the blind, and I'm shooting at that time was a brand new turkey shotgun designed for turkey hunting.
Yep.
A 12 gauge. I'm not going to mention the name of the brand, but it starts with an R.
Right.
And so, man, I'm sitting there. I'm excited. Michael's got this bird doing all kind. He is just absolutely, the light's perfect, as you were talking about, David, saying he is just flaming. He's, oh my God, he's beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And I'm waiting for Michael and say, okay, I've got enough footage and all that kind of thing. And to start with, the first time I tried to shoot him, I've got it up, and Michael says, take him. I click the safety off, and he goes, click. I'm holding that shotgun. Hopefully it's going to go off. Maybe it's sort of delayed direction. Birds never even looked at us. He is so intent on that decoy. And
Remember,
so
he got up on it and started breeding.
That was with the second.
The second shot. That's right. The second try, not shot.
So we ain't quite got there. So very carefully, I ejected that shell and ran another one in there. I was sure it made all kinds of racket. Now the turkey he's trying to breed the decoy.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, ready, click. Bad shells. What the hell is going on? Moved in a third time, and this gobbler still, you had that gobbler so enamored with what was going on at the time with your calling that he paid no attention to us at all. Slipped it in a third time, same thing. Okay, finally, maybe this is going to go click. No, I mean, now the gobbler still hadn't paid us a whole lot of attention. So at this point, I'm going, I am tired of this. I reached up, grabbed that barrel at the end of it, slung it back behind me, threw it at the dead gum turkey. Almost hit the turkey.
Yeah, the shotgun comes flying in, helicoptering in, looked like one of your helicopter crashes, and then the turkey just runs off through the mesquite.
Finally figured out there's something going on. Maybe you shouldn't be.
I'd never get. I was like, how cool is that? My first experience to hunt with Larry Weishuhn, and we couldn't get the gun to shoot. We couldn't believe it. We laughed.
To this day, I still have not figured out. After that, actually, I think maybe I don't know, maybe the firing pin was broken or something, but I still got the gun. I've got it in a case. I've got a little story that I've written up that's with that shotgun.
No way. That's so cool.
What we just talked about. So
that was so memorable to me. And looking
Michael
back, I'm so glad it happened that way because I've been able to tell that story and we've told it together. And it was awesome. Went back and the camp was awesome. Remember, we always ate a good food and laugh, sit around, watch a little TV but I do want to go back a little bit, Larry. Okay. So obviously I'll get on turkeys. I love turkeys. I love deer. But going back even to the deer management, and you mentioned early on, like one of your degrees and one thing you studied specifically was disease. And I remember,
right.
So the first really big problem, I would assume, based on the literature I read, the screwworms were insanity back then. So y'all had to fight that.
Yeah, the screwworms were an interesting thing. They're a native indigenous fly that lays eggs, and those eggs turn into larvae or pupa that are flesh eaters, live flesh eaters. They don't eat carrion. They only eat live flesh. And they were found, you had them in Alabama and in Georgia and all the way across the southeast and into Texas, but they were probably worse in Texas than they were anywhere else. And the thing about it was any open sore, and it could be a scratch, and they would lay eggs on any warm-blooded animal. I mean,
similar
like
to a fly and a maggot,
turkeys,
essentially.
Yeah, turkeys, birds. You name the animal. Domestic livestock, deer. And what would happen is particularly when those fawns were born, with the livestock, we doctored calves. I mean, you carried around when the calves were born. You spent time with them to make sure that they didn't have screwworms, or if you did, you got rid of them. But with the fawns, you couldn't do that. So when that fawn was born, the umbilical cord was wet. Well, they'd lay eggs on that umbilical cord. If that fawn happened to get a little bit older, and I'm talking about a few days, where that umbilical cord would dry up and start to fall off, there'd be a little sore spot, right? Well, they'd lay eggs there, and what would happen, those people would go in there, or larvae would go in, and they'd literally eat that animal up from inside out.
Horrendous.
Yes.
Situation.
And I mean, horrible stuff. So the years in South Texas and the rut's an interesting thing with whitetail deer. It only occurs so that 7.5 months later, the fawns are born at the most opportune time. In a lot of parts of Texas, the rut was basically had to be over about no more than a 2-week period, because if those fawns were born outside of that 2-week period, they weren't going to survive. And a lot of them didn't, and that was one of the first things that we dealt with in terms of. And that was what happened is that through research, they determined that a screwworm fly female will only mate one time. Mm-hmm. And so what they did is they created literally millions and millions and millions of flies and applied radiation to them to sterilize the male. So, and then they would fly in a little 152, 172 adjacent transects with boxes filled with flies. It looked like about a little bit smaller than a cereal box. and they would throw these flies out, and then those irradiated flies would mate with the local flies and would not produce eggs. They would produce eggs, but would not produce viable offspring.
That is
so
interesting.
That's how they got rid of the screwworm thing and suppressed. Of course, now we're looking at the threat of screwworms again approaching Texas out of Mexico. So there's a huge effort right now to try to bring back some of those fly production things in Texas and in Mexico as well too.
I mean, it technically should work.
Be devastating in so many different ways because again, any warm-blooded animal.
It could be your, like I said, the situation with domestic animals could get it, but you could treat them. You would realize, and you
put
could
your hands on them and treat them.
Put the old purple stuff on it. That's what
it was purple. There was no purple stuff.
That thing would heal anything.
Yeah,
I don't know where that medicine went. I remember.
It was probably so good that they pulled it off the market.
Probably, yeah.
But that was one of the things. Then when we got rid of the screwworm fly, the deer populations just blossom like you can't believe, from being hardly any deer anywhere to hundreds of deer. And then we started, the biggest disease problem we had at that point was hollow belly.
Really? What was that?
I never starving to death.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't have enough food.
It was hollow belly.
Enough habitat to support the deer.
They take themselves out of house and home kind of thing. But then also, that's when, these days we have problems periodically with EHD or blue tongue. And essentially, if you look at it from a pure disease process, they're the same when you get right
Is
down
EHD similar to the screwworm, but a different way? Or
totally different.
So EHD, explain how that
EHD
happens.
is carried primarily by a little gnat called a Culicoides gnat or buffalo gnat or whatever. And it takes the bite from one animal to the other to spread it. But it's originally, the EHD or blue tongue originally came out of South Africa when they started bringing domestic sheep into Texas and parts of the Southwest. Those sheep brought with them blue tongue or EHD. And so that's where it started from. That's why we lost most of our desert bighorn sheep in Texas at one time, because as the domestic sheep went that way, they were infected by blue tongue. And but that was back in the 1860s and 1880s. These days, we hear about blue tongue or EHD killing large number of animals in the Midwest, as far up as even into Canada in some instances. And usually what happens is it starts getting dry. There's not a whole lot of water in some of these areas. These particularly bucks seem like show up in these water areas, and that's where those Culicoides gnats breed, and so they get bitten. And in most instances, the blue tongue or EHD in itself probably won't kill the animal, but what it does, it's an Ebola virus when you get right down to it, and it destroys the capillaries. And the capillaries, there's a lot of capillaries in the heart and lung area, or the lung areas. And most animals carry some type of pneumonia. Almost all of us carry some kind of pneumonia that we're not affected by it until we're stressed in some certain ways. These deer were stressed by the EHD virus or the blue tongue virus, and so they died of pneumonia, is what really kills them most of the time.
And now, is there a significant difference between, say, what we hear EHD and blue tongue? Are they similar, one and the same? Or
from a practical aspect, they're one and the same.
I gotcha.
They're one and the same. And the reason it's called blue tongue is a lot of times those animals in the early stages, they'll have ulcers on their tongue. And so, and for that reason, they called it blue tongue. But it goes back to the domestic sheep because their tongue is a little darker blue color.
Darker blue.
Yeah, than what whitetail deer are.
So basically chicken, snake, rat, snake.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Depends on who you talk to, kind of thing.
That's wild.
These days, again, we've lost these animals and we'll continue to lose them in a lot of these areas. Now in Texas, where we've evolved a whitetail deer herd that has been in the presence, or there's been the presence of blue tongue all these many years, or EHD, we very seldom lose any animals due to blue tongue or EHD anymore. It seemed like there's they're not really immune to it, but there seems to be some buildup in terms of a natural resistance. So over a long period of time, like in areas in Iowa, I've seen huge deer and huge numbers of deer die from it, and even farther. But if you have it like every year for 30 or 40 or 50 years, chances are you're going to have animals that survive that have somewhat of a resistance to it, or may even develop a natural immunity to it.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything outside of that resistance as a farmer, private landowner, or possibly the state could do? Is there that create those buffalo gnats? Have you heard, or has there been much research, like you talked about the radiation and making those gnats sterile possibly?
That's a very expensive process, and their breeding habits are a little bit different from what the screwworm fly are. But the things that you can do is if you have water is on your property and it's a small pond or something like that, if there's any way you can continually add fresh water to it, that will help a lot, because it takes that stagnant water and kind of mud area for those flies to breed. And if you can change that up, it'll do a lot better. I mean, there are now water systems out there that you can establish that are, even water troughs that are low to the ground that all animals can reach. That would be so much better than some of the little natural ponds or the drying up creeks. And in some instances, we've gone in some of the areas that I've worked in, and we rocked in, if you will, some of those little nasty low spots kind of thing.
Just rock them in, keep the mud where they can't basically breed.
No real water, and the deer, now there are rocks there. They can't drink the water there, so they're going to find another source that's a fresher water source.
That makes sense, because we lose a few deer in Georgia every year to EHD, but never astronomical. And from what I was understood by biologists, I guess because we typically have that buffalo gnat, our conditions are always, rainy,
you
dry.
Get enough rainfall. Yeah, but you're getting enough rainfall, to keep that water fresh and to keep the water flowing. It takes that stagnant pond. If it's a running stream, there's nothing to be concerned about.
Well, that makes sense, because I know everybody that, especially with the value of whitetails, they'll invest any amount of money to keep them or have them. And I've often wondered, I wonder if there's anything you could do. Sounds like it gets back to, once again, habitat. If you even in those conditions, if you can control the habitat, that these conditions that, let's say every couple of years that this happens. I remember Northeast Montana.
Oh my God.
They would be thriving, and EHD or blue tongue would come in, and it would seemingly kill 90-95% of the deer. It felt like. I mean, it smelled like a graveyard.
It did, and it does. But again, the whitetail deer is a very resilient animal in so many different ways. And those areas where they have had those severe die-offs, in a matter of about 3 or 4 years, the reproductive rate is really good after that kind of thing happens, again, because now there's so much more for them to eat on a daily basis. And that's something that people forget sometimes. We think in terms of seasonal diets with whitetail deer. You need to think of those. If you're really interested in producing a healthy deer, that deer having something good to eat every day, regardless.
Right.
That's where you get the best deer herds in terms of quality and size of body and antlers.
And before we go into, because I want to ask you some questions about CWD, that's kind of everywhere now, but talking about seasonal diet, what is the perfect seasonal diet in your opinion as a biologist, and just your history from how it varies? You hear people say it's, protein, which obviously we understand, I guess, some about the protein, but is there somebody listening that would say, hey man, if I could set my place up from January to that next December, what would I want to feed my deer if I could afford it?
It really depends a lot on from a natural habitat kind of thing, starting with there. You want to have the best habitat that you can have in terms of species variation, in terms of vegetation. And I've been in some places to where you have all this great deer browse, but you know where it is? It's 8 feet above them. It's not, unless there's a giraffe there, they're not going to do it again. You want to be able to manipulate that down to where you still got the root stock and you're getting fresh growth there. And managing your habitat for food throughout. Food plots can help, because you can have seasonal food plots as well. I used to get tickled because, and these days a lot of people do feed supplemental diets kind of thing, or supplemental rations. And the one thing I will mention there is that you want to remember, you're not feeding the deer, you're feeding that deer's rumen, the microflora that's there. And that microflora is what breaks down whatever that deer eats. So if there's a ration that you got those deer on and you change something in it, it kills all that stuff, and they start all over again. So once you start a program, you want to maintain that program and make sure that you're getting what you're paying for, kind of thing as well.
So you can get ripped off on supplemental feed.
You can get ripped off just because it's got an 18% protein or 16% protein. And deer they utilize about 12 to 14% when you get right down to it. But there was a major company several years ago that to keep the protein levels up was grinding up chicken feathers and putting them in the pellets. Well, guess what? Chicken feathers are high in protein. But you know what the utilization rate is of chicken feathers in deer? It's pretty close to zero.
Yeah.
So even, you were paying for a huge protein level. One of the things that in a deer's diet, there's several things that we learned over the years. And years ago, there was a Dr. Larry Warner, and Larry unfortunately has passed away, but Larry and I collected antlers from throughout North America and had them analyzed for trace minerals as much as anything. And we wanted to see if a certain area, like in Alberta, there's big antlers there, or certain areas of Texas or Kansas or wherever. The one thing that we found is when we analyzed all these things is that there were three trace minerals that were high in every time that we found big antlers, regardless of where they were. And it was copper, zinc, and manganese.
That's the three.
Those were the three that were more prevalent in big antlers, regardless of where we were, kind of thing. And then also, several years ago, I used to be in a partnership with the Los Cazadores Deer Contest.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And we worked with a company called ADM that owns Mormon Minerals to develop a ration for different areas. Well, we spent literally several lifetimes worth of money for the research that we did. And the one thing that we found, we were working with Texas A&M Kingsville, and the one thing that we learned out of all that with all their top nutritionists is that energy is really quite as important as protein is.
So carbs is not
fats.
Non-important.
They are really important,
right,
on a daily basis, almost as important as what protein is. And you look at a lot of these places here where we are in Georgia. If you got acorns, you got high energy there. Okay, but then what about the rest of the year when there's not a whole lot else out there in terms
getting
of
into now, like here in Georgia where we sat doing the podcast here. It got down, it was like 25 this morning. It was cold. Well, we had a crazy acorn crop, but they've about eat them all up.
Yeah.
And so
now they're starting to hurt on the energy side of things. So if there's something that you can do to provide energy, and that can be done through some of the fruits and berries and all those other kind of things, or through planting food plots, that may have, like some of the peas, having winter peas or something like that, where you're getting not only protein, but you're also getting a fair amount of energy. Or peanuts. There's a lot of peanuts. A lot of people use peanuts in rations even. And there you're getting oil and you're getting protein. Same thing with cotton seeds become a big deal. Fortified cottonseed, and the fortified means that they're adding trace minerals to it. But there you're getting protein and you got high oil content. So those are the things, if you're into that, and there's pros and cons for supplementation, but if you're into that, there are things that you can do to really help that deer herd right now. The two stress periods, for the most part, are those bucks coming out of the rut and the does are now trying to grow fawns. Well, right now is a stressful time for deer. This time
for the does and the
January,
bucks,
February, March, for both of them. And then a lot of times late summer is the same way, because you've gone through the spring growth and the acorns haven't fallen, or there's not a whole lot of fruit available, and there's not a whole lot of vegetation in some areas that's really high quality. So those are the two stress periods when you get right down to it with whitetail deer, for the most part.
That makes
and that
sense.
Varies from area to area, of course.
That makes sense. And for somebody, what would you recommend? The supplemental or food plots, or a little of both? If it's one or the other?
A little of both. In some areas we can't supplement,
right, it's not legal,
we'll get to that just a little bit, but it's not legal. But so to me, in those areas, you do food plots. I used to get tickled because when I first started coming into the Southeast years ago, I'd go out and look at people's properties at their request, and we would go out, and here'd be this unbelievably lush stand of some kind of rye. I mean, it'd be knee high, and it just looked absolutely beautiful. And so I'd walk out in that little field and I start looking, the only tracks I'm seeing are walking across it. I don't see where anything is nipping on it. And I'm I'm going, this is really pretty, but why are you planting? Well, we're planting it for the deer. I said, for the deer to look at.
Right.
What do you mean? I said, well, show me any place here where the deer have eaten on it, and show me where a deer has walked around where you can see has obviously been trying to eat on it. So they couldn't do it. So
they don't like it, do they?
No.
I guess if they have to eat it?
Well, if they had to eat it, they probably would.
Right.
But we went in and started planting different types of blends of different things. And I can remember it was the first few times I'd get a call from one of those ranchers over here and go, I planted this and the blankety blank deer ate everything. It looks like a ball field out there. And I said, I can't believe they would. I said, why did you plant it? We planted it so the deer would eat it instead of us looking at it and looking at pretty. I said, that tells you, number one of several things. Either you got to get rid of some deer or you got to plant more stuff.
Makes sense. Kind of like look at the liver and onions on the buffet. All the fried chicken's gone, but the liver and onions, there's one old country guy like, I love livers and onions, and 30 other people in the restaurant like, you can have it all.
It's all yours.
And, what is some of the favorite legumes that you like from a biologist?
There's all kinds of different clovers that are out there that you can plant that come on at different times. Personally, two of my favorite things to plant during the fall are triticale or triticale and Austrian winter pea.
Really?
Yeah. Those two, the thing about triticale or triticale, however you want to pronounce it, it's a wheat rye cross. It is higher in all things energy related or nutrition related.
And triticale, what is it more like? Is it
it does look like a cross between wheat and rye.
I gotcha.
What it does, it grows more prostrate, and so it comes out and goes
kind of
out and then
soybeany looking the way it comes up
so
and
it
out.
comes out and does like this.
Yeah.
It's a leaf, like the others are. They're the cereal grain. But generally, it's very drought tolerant. It's very cold tolerant. It grows in almost any kind of soil that you plant it in. And so to me, it does well, and deer absolutely loved it. And I've used it on places that I've dealt with, from Alberta to Maine to Florida to Texas,
everywhere,
to Montana and Texas and points in between, and then the Austrian winter pea, we just plant over it and overseed it, and it produces a bean.
Kind of like a cow pea.
Yes, it's like a cow pea.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to do something in the spring or either in the summer, one of the things years ago, I was working in South Texas. They'd had it, and we were in a bad drought, and I was driving from San Antonio to Laredo, just out of Cotulla, and the railroad track there, and looked over, and here's this spot of green that looked like maybe 2 acres of green right on the railroad track. And I thought, God, nothing can be growing out here now. So I went over and looked at it, and I wasn't sure what it was, but I grabbed a bunch of it and went back to Cotulla and got in touch with the guys that I knew that knew a whole lot about planting different types of grains and things. And they go, oh yeah, that's iron clay peas. And I said, iron clay peas? And he said, yeah. He said, yeah, oh yeah. I said, we used to plant a bunch of it years and years ago. I don't think people plant it anymore. I said, have you been down the road and looked to see what it was? And he goes, no. So he and I drove down, and we were in a bad drought, and this stuff was growing, and the deer had just found it. And they ate the daylights out of it. So to me, that's one of those plants that does well in a lot of different things. And then to me, the deer can be finicky, and I like the blends as well too. Because, if you look at it, the deer ruminants like a cow. The only difference is a cow's got a big old square muzzle. When she gets ready to eat something, she runs her tongue out there and she pulls all of it in. That deer with that pointed muzzle is set up so that it can go in and find the most nutritious part of that plant. So it goes in and picks this part of this part. And when you do the blend kind of thing, the beauty of it is you got something that grows right now. Okay, 2 weeks later, something else comes up. 3 weeks later, something else comes up. So you've always got a little bit of something different there. And if you don't want to blend them all together, then run strips in your food plot. Run them about 2 or 3 cedars wide and plant this. Okay, and then come over here and plant this, and then come over here and plant this. That tells you a lot of different things too, because now once you plant it, you know whether it's going to grow there or not. And the best source for finding out what the best thing is to plant in an area is find the local farmer. And find out what he plants that he hates the deer for. That's one of the things. That's one of the things you want to start with, and do that, and then plan all these other things, and then you can judge by what kind of grazing or browsing am I getting off of this. How well did the forage grow? And if you find something that in that area, your particular area, with your soil soils, your rainfall, that the deer that grows there, that the deer like, and just plant more of it.
That makes sense, because I felt like I've seen just in my travels where, and it makes sense possibly with the deer's rumen in their stomach, to where similar to us, one person is craving Mexican food and maybe a spicy content, and other guys just wanting a cheeseburger. And then there's some bodies just want some white rice with a little salt and pepper on it. And it's almost like our bodies, I don't know if it's our taste bud, is our body itself.
Sometimes I think your body is telling you that there's something in there that you need. There's some innate thing that clicks into it, kind of thing.
And we're probably gluttons, but those deer are not. Their body is telling them everything they're searching for.
Yeah.
Exactly. I would assume
they do. Yes. Occasionally you'll find that deer that's. A lot of times people say, "How do you learn about deer?" And I said, "Study people." Mm-hmm. Study people. Look at the deer's behavior. Look at that person, different person's behavior, how he deals with people, how he deals with certain situations, what food he eats, when does he get up, when does he go to work. I said, and deer are every deer out there is an individual, as you and I and everybody out there that's watching or hearing this.
We're just getting started. Hold on. We got a little bit more coming after this.
This January 9th through 11th, the Outdoors Extravaganza returns to Dallas, bringing the hunting community together under one roof. Step into 3 days filled with worldwide hunting adventures, expert international outfitters, innovative gear, and the brands shaping the future of our hunting and outdoor lifestyle. Connect with the people who live for the hunt, the adventure, and the stories that come with it. Explore the latest advancements in gear, talk strategy and conservation with seasoned professionals, and discover new destinations that stretch far beyond Texas. From global hunts to premium camping and fishing opportunities, every corner of the show offers something extraordinary. Join TTHA and SCI at the Outdoors Extravaganza, January 9th through 11th at the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center in Dallas. A wingman flies close with unwavering dedication. At Folds of Honor, a wingman stands with families of America's fallen or disabled heroes. The burial flag given to their grieving family is folded 13 times. As a wingman, your $13 monthly donation provides scholarships to their spouses and children. 13 folds, $13. Become a wingman. Join today at foldsofhonor.org.
That definitely makes sense. And I've always thought of every animal I hunt, like when I think of elk, or especially calling them, I always think about what would I do in this situation? But what would I do if I had zero morals or standards? I mean, like none.
Exactly.
Because they don't have nothing. They'll come in and eat the last. They don't have a conscience. There can be a little bit of buck forage oats left, and they just, I'm going to eat them all. I ain't worried about Junior over here. So we obviously will think, or we have certain judgment. But yeah, that's really interesting. Like if you study them, and there's certain people, you're right, certain human beings are hard to pattern. Like, you try to get somebody on the phone, like, dude, he's in Italy. Like, what? Italy? Other guys, you could set your alarm 6 o'clock in the morning. You're going to get them coming to the coffee pot every day.
Exactly.
I mean, within probably seconds.
Exactly. And you know which chair they're going to sit in.
Yeah, they're going to come get the coffee, sit there, read this newspaper, or scroll on their phone. And you're right, deer. And it seems like to me, those deer that don't want to establish a pattern are the hardest to get within range.
Well, they really are. And a lot of times, we've talk a little bit about biology of deer too. I'm looking at your deer heads in here, and I can probably point out one or two deer that did not fight very much.
Yep.
That probably didn't do a whole lot of breeding, because you start looking at it, and I'm looking at a buck right up there, and he's got all these kind of little extra points. Mm-hmm. Well, if that deer had done a lot of rubbing, any fighting, any chasing, he'd have broken off those points. So he's probably one of those deer that produces just enough testosterone through the testosterone cycle to grow his antlers, to harden the antlers, to have the velvet come off, to do a little bit of rubbing on him just to rub it off. But he's not at a high enough level of testosterone where he's actively going out and chasing does, or where he's getting into fights.
That's really cool and interesting.
You've watched some of the really biggest antlered bucks, and I've been fortunate to be able to do that on places that were hunted and not hunted. Some of the really biggest antlered bucks, they're pretty darn timid. You know, some buck comes in, he lays his head back, and the eyes, ears go, and you go, that other buck go, I don't want anything to do with that one. And those are generally, so often, those really big bucks with big antlers, they don't get run down during the rut, so they stay in good condition. So when the antlers come off, then guess what? They're in great body condition to start the next antler cycle.
That makes sense, and a lot of those bucks are the hardest to kill because they're not visible as much.
They're
where that big
so
mature 8-pointer that you look and he's got a broke G2 by middle October, you're going to see him every time you go to the food plot.
Absolutely.
You're right. That makes complete sense. I've honestly never thought of that. That's a heck of a tip. So you can learn a lot by studying even your trail cameras.
You can.
Some of the habits, like this personality of this buck, he's a fighter. I can tell. You know, he's broke off his four.
Gets back to studying people. You know, they're people that are the same way. They'll go way out of their way to avoid any kind of argument or anything, any confrontation kind of thing. And other guys, you know, it's like dominant bucks. When I was a kid growing up, we always had a great big guy that was bigger than I was that loved to fight, and there was always this little guy that was about half my size that all he wanted to do was fight. Those were the two dominant bucks in the area as far as I was concerned. You know, were they the bucks that I would have had they had antlers and it was a totally different situation? I probably wouldn't try to pursue either one of them.
It is interesting.
They were the dominant
It is
bucks.
interesting, and I think sometimes hunters I've seen don't put enough thought in those personalities. You know, you kind of put them all in the same bucket, you know, and then obviously even some of the does have different personalities. Some are late, and some bucks, like, you know, you'll hear people, a deer come out an hour before daylight, you know, and you'll get a shot. And of course, everybody, farm deer, high fence. And it's so amazing. I have seen deer in some decently high pressured areas that seem to be more visible. It might not even be a buck that you shoot,
right?
But maybe it's a deer that we all know on the hunting club as this 3.5-year-old 8-pointer, and everybody will see him within a half mile of there on any given evening because he's just out and about. And you know, if you'll follow that deer, and if he makes it to say 4, somebody kills him every single. I mean, somebody's going to get him.
Somebody's going to get him.
Where there'll be another deer to where literally you'll track their trajectory as we got trail cameras and stuff, and by the time they get 5 or 6, even whether there's no pressure or a lot of pressure, there seem to be nearly at times feel like it's impossible to get them to make a mistake.
I used to get so tickled. A lot of the ranches that I managed, our goal was to get them into that 5.5-year age class. And so that meant we were selectively taking particular deer. But it was really interesting because there were certain deer that I could watch because they had a split ear or they had a white spot on their body kind of thing. And I watched those deer until they turned to be 4.5 years of age. And it was at 4.5 as their antlers started growing. It was like they walked up to a water hole, looked in, and they saw these antlers up above their head. And they've been the biggest doofus in the world, showing up everywhere. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, you know. And they back out of there. And that deer, for the most part, at 4.5 is when they start doing that. I used to have hunters on properties, and including some that were high fence. And I knew it was there because before trail cameras, I spent every night out there with light looking, and the game warden and I. And they'd come to me and go, you keep telling us we got these big deer. We're not seeing anything. All we're seeing is like 3-year-old deer, you know, 8 and 10 points that score in the 120s, 130s. We're not seeing any of these big deer. So I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, I'll come get you tonight at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I'll call the warden. I'd call the game warden. Warden would come out, and we'd take the hunters, and we'd show them with a light what we had out there. And I mean, we would show them deer that were in the 150s, 160s, and 170s.
Holy cow.
That they had never seen. You know, and I told them, I said, guys, I can tell you how to grow big deer. You can have to figure out yourself how to hunt them.
That's very true.
The interesting thing about a lot of those bucks were that we got like that most of those hunters hunted from before legal shooting time till about 9:30, 10 o'clock maybe, and they go to the house, go have lunch, go watch football. You know, they'd go back out about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And during the middle part of the day, I could go out there when they were all at the camp. I'd go mess around and do whatever I need to do on the property, and I'd see all kinds of big bucks. And to me, was it a natural thing, or was it a fact that the patterned the hunters? You know,
makes sense that they could.
But it was amazing the number of big bucks that I would see during that from about 10:30 to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on places that were hunted heavily, not hunted heavily, and you know,
there is something to be said about, you know, you can give a deer a lot of credit that they're that brilliant. and that they pattern, and somebody can argue that, but I would rather say that, yeah, I do confidently feel they pattern us, but I think even that can be manipulated. Like I've noticed, I live in Georgia, and it's a bait state. So obviously we have lush green fields, but I also have some spinners on my property.
Exactly.
And the deer have gotten used to it. And I noticed something I started putting together. I got to where I got a Kawasaki Ridge out there, and typically, and it's not even, I enjoy the fact of going and filling my feeders and looking at my food plots, and stuff. But then obviously, like any hunters, it starts getting close to the season. Like, man, I don't want to go in there. I'm just going to wait and stay out of there altogether. I started noticing the days, even if it was later in the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, where it was already pushing it. Maybe I flew back home and like, man, I know that feeder's out. Those days that I took and the habit of keep going in that circle with that same vehicle, even those big bucks, I noticed right after I'd leave, those bucks would be there. And I was like, wait a minute. Yes, I do believe they pattern it. But in this case, this Kawasaki Ridge side by side is going to my favor. They probably stood up out of their bed and heard it.
Yep.
Like, that sucker's putting some more food in the bucket. All right, people can get mad at that. But the same token, say I didn't have anything out there as a food plot, and I was walking back out there every day, and then, from, let's say, 3 o'clock to dark, I'm hunting, and every time I get out of that stand, run all the deer out of the food plot, they probably start realizing between 3 and 7 o'clock is danger.
It is, but you mentioned the vehicle thing. Deer get used to the sound of certain vehicles, that they're not threatened by. There was a buck I hunted in Laredo, just north of Laredo, 8-point buck, probably would have scored maybe 140. Old deer, but he was a challenge. And I'd seen him through the helicopter survey, and my deal on that ranch was that I could shoot a management buck if I wanted to. So I said, I want to shoot that 8-point buck. So I started hunting them, and I did everything that I could legally do to hunt this deer. I mean, you name it, from baiting to rattling to calling to sitting and watching, still hunting. Every way I could hunt him, I couldn't kill him. Yet every day there was a cowboy. His name was Weddell, and he lived on the ranch, and he took care of the property. And so I'd go back to camp, and I said, Weddell, did you see my deer? And he goes, "Sí, Señor Colorado." He says, "He's right there where you're hunting. See him all the time." I go, "You see that deer all the time?" He says, "Sí, Señor." He says, "I saw him this morning." So I thought, golly. So I'd go back out and hunt, and then I was one day, a little bit later, like a week later, I went back down there, and I was sitting in another spot, not very far from there, and I thought, well, maybe he moved. And I hear this truck coming, and it's making all kinds of racket, and Weddell's got the radio station turned up to the local Mexican music stand. He's singing along at the top of his voice. And so, anyway, I go back, and I said, "Weddell, did you see my deer?" He says, "Señor Colorado, he was standing right there where I've been telling you." So I thought, So I went and found a bunch of old tin, threw it on the back of my truck, found 2 5-gallon buckets with rocks. I put rocks in, tied them behind the back of my truck so they made a whole lot of noise, trying to sound like his truck.
Trying to imitate
Got my truck, turned the radio station up, sang along the best I could.
Turned it to La Bamba. Yeah.
Drove within 20 steps of that deer and killed him.
Unbelievable.
And in Texas, you could kill legally out of the truck.
That's exactly right.
And on private land. And I just get tickled because I'd mentioned that story to somebody. I said, "You killed a deer out of that vehicle?" And I said, "You darn right I did, and I'm proud of the fact I did. This is how I find what." So, deer do get used to different things. And, with Weddell's truck, he didn't feel...
Wasn't threatened
in
at
any
all.
form or fashion.
That is not just, to me, theory. That I've seen those things happen too. Like, to the thought of, man, maybe I want to hunt this deer. And I've also seen it where the most unpressured property in the world that has no traffic, and then all of a sudden it's that way, and you're protecting it, you're keeping it pristine, and then the days you finally do get there, man, it's like people freak out. Like the deer just freak out. One four-wheeler rides in, or one truck. It's almost like I've noticed I know on this farm we actually actively farm pecans, and we haven't as much this year. And the deer have definitely are way loosey-goosey with the farming activity. My son's got a little dirt bike track right down in the bottom here. Literally yesterday, I noticed he was riding his bike. Within 100 yards, there was 4 or 5 does on my camera right at the base of his track because it's just in a good spot. And so there's no doubt they're completely used to the hubbub. Where if this farm, I'm killing better deer now on my farm because I'm living here than when I didn't live here and I just come every once in a while and hunted it, because it was almost like when we pulled in the gate, like, what's going on? It's like you don't freak out at Walmart parking lot when you go because there's cars everywhere and there's people and you walk in there and do your business. But if all of a sudden, if you pulled up and there's nobody there, you don't know what to do.
Oh, yeah,
or vice versa. If you're a loner and nobody ever comes to your home, picture the Unabomber sitting up there building some weird device. Somebody pulls up his front door, you might get shot.
Exactly.
Where the people that's always having to get-togethers and the kids coming over here and grilling steak and having fish fries. You could have 4 or 5 cars. I don't even know. Like, hey man, what's up? Like, you want a beer? Eat with us, because it definitely seems a lot of those things we overthink it, but you can use that same high level technical thinking.
Yes, sir, you can.
But in a layman's way of manipulation, and it can work. So
it's a learning process.
Yeah.
I tell people every time I go to the woods, I learn. Every day you learn something. If you have an open mind, you will learn something. You learn to be an observer of what's going on. I used to hate to go to the mall with my wife, but so she would go do her shopping, whatever she's going to do, and I'd find me a spot and I'd just sit there and I'd watch people, and I'd see somebody come walking and I'd immediately close my eyes and I'd try to recall, okay, how tall was this person? What color was the hair? Could I see the eyes? What color were the eyes? What was they wearing? How were they walking? Who was with them and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd open my eyes again to see how close I was. And in the process of doing that, I taught myself to become very observant to where you immediately see something, you immediately remember it kind of thing. And that helps a lot with hunting. Years ago, I used to do a lot of seminars called 5 seconds, where if you have a really big buck that shows up, you've got 5 seconds to see him, estimate what his antlers are, estimate his age, estimate the distance to him, and make the shot. That took about 10 seconds to tell right there. So to me, that helped me in terms of not only observing from a hunting perspective, but also from a biology perspective of watching these animals. I became a better observer, and to where I paid more attention to, when they were eating on a plant, I wanted to see what part they were eating, not just I knew it was a whatever yopon or oak or whatever, but what part were they eating, kind of thing.
All that is intriguing to me, and obviously we talking specifically in this case about deer, but I'm so fascinated with wildlife in general.
Than
every
black
animal
bear
in here
over there, or your moose, or it's really the same sort of thing when you get right down to it.
It becomes so fun, and the industry or the hunters, sometimes we get so discombobulated and disconnected on how and why, bait, food plot, you ought to hunt natural browse. And I've always thought, I think, Jimmy John here said, everybody's in their evolution of where you want to be. I mean, there's
right.
places you can go, understand that hunting by rule has gotten more expensive. The cost of living does get more expensive every year, but it just is, what do you do,
I hear all this about how hunting is so expensive these days. If you took the percentage back in the 1950s of what somebody who hunted spent of their gross income that year. Well, back then they were making, if they made $5,000 a year, they were doing pretty good. Most hunters and fishermen spent over $500 a year on hunting and fishing. Okay, now we're making, say the average, somebody's making $70,000 or $50,000. You think about, well, I'm going to spend $5,000 or $7,000. Oh my God. Well, guess what? That it's still the same percentage that we're paying for outdoor recreation as we did when people weren't making money compared to now. But now the dollar figure is bigger simply because we start with something bigger.
I agree. There's a certain part that I sympathize with understanding that it's harder to find access today, like when we were kids. However, man, you can't get mad at a landowner. No. He owns it. Your name, like I've got some land around here that I'm pay more than I feel like is fair, but I do not own the land. Now, this particular property, the hardest and most expensive thing I've done that makes me uncomfortable every month when I see what I owe at the bank and I write them a check. And I just turn to my wife and my kids like, we can hunt and stay here one more month.
One more month.
And we're gonna do what we can to get up this month's rent.
Exactly.
And so, but then I'll get hate because it must be nice. You hunting that acres over there. You got that farm deer in Georgia. I'm like, dude, man, quit throwing shade or getting mad at me because I'm put myself in a bind to buy this thing. Then I'm turning around and lease some land. My dad and I hunt over there, just north of here, paying too much, but I don't own it. I could probably buy it, but then I'm right back to what is the comp in the area and is it worth the investment? So
right.
My point is we're not in control. We don't walk into houses freely and just go eat in their cupboard or grab a ribeye out. And so yes, people realize there's a value to the recreation and or whatever it is. And so I do agree that it has changed from, I remember I could go around here and knock on doors and everybody let me turkey hunt. Not anymore.
No.
So I don't know. It is what it is, but it's the land. It's his property. I mean, he don't let me go in there and kill a fatty calf either and take it back and butcher it in my deer cooler up here. And now he's like, well, there's a value on this turkey. There's a value on this deer. We're not farming. I got a couple grandkids that want to hunt and pay me this and you can do it. And so I think I understand people's complaining about it, but what is it? I don't think necessarily hunting is going away. I think it's as better shape than it's ever been from the resources. I mean,
it is from the resources. And the bottom line is hunters pay for conservation all the way through. And because we're paying, you're talking about landowners, because we're willing to pay dollars to have access to his property to hunt or her property to hunt, guess what? Now they're paying attention to the habitat. They're paying attention to the fact of the welfare of the animals that are out there, because it is an economic base. When you get right down to it, I do a lot, as you mentioned early on, with DSC, with Dallas Safari Club. And we do, for years, I've served on the DSC Foundation, which is a granting arm of of Dallas Safari Club, to where we take in money and we provide it to very vetted projects across the country. And one of the things that we've learned, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that if we manage for a game species, regardless of what it is, then everything benefits beyond that. The Dallas Safari Club, it is safari. Safari is nothing more than a Swahili term for an adventure.
Correct.
It doesn't denote
safari can be going squirrel hunting.
Or some of my most fun safaris are for squirrels in your part of the country.
Absolutely.
And but it's like with the elephant kind of thing. And of course, we got DSC's the convention coming up in Atlanta very shortly. We can talk about that a little bit later as well too. But because there's an economic value to those elephants in these areas because of hunting, they're elephants. The interesting thing is the only place there are elephants anymore in Africa is where they hunt.
Where they don't hunt them, there are no elephants.
There are no elephants. There are no elephants.
That says everything. That shows you it all.
When you get right down to it, again, hunters pay for conservation, and when you're managing for elephants and trying to keep the habitat in good shape. Well, guess what? All the other little animals that are there are going to do well too, as far as the birds and even the fish. When you get right down to it, because the waters and everything is involved. But hunting is important to wildlife and perpetuation of wildlife. The conservation means the wise use of. I often talk about the difference between conservation and preservation. Conservation is the wise use of. I repeated that for a purpose, because with preservation, generally you're talking about preserving one thing. Mm-hmm. Look at what we've done with the wolves in the West. We're preserving the wolves.
It's
but guess
train
what?
wreck
We're
too.
Destroying everything else that's out there. That's preservation. Mm-hmm. If it was really done properly, they would be conserved. There would be conservation, which would mean the wise use of those animals to make sure that we perpetuate all the other things that are out there as well too. So there's a lot of difference between conservation and preservation.
There's a big difference, and it just hit me as I'm sitting here thinking about how conservation works. I remember when I was in high school, I graduated in 91, and I remember I wanted to go hunt some of these places. And so once again, what am I tasked with? 18-year-old kid, don't hardly have a pot to piss in. Well, I'm staying at my dad's house. So me and a buddy, Ricky Joe Bishop, another guy named Shane Collier, we start calling around. We start calling game wardens and Illinois Game and Fish and saying, hey, we're just out-of-state hunters. And surprisingly, they were very nice. And And they said, absolutely. There's a couple, and you know who they put in touch with? Farmers that were constantly complaining about the deer crop eating their beans. And I remember, it was a valuable lesson. We got on the phone, literally, just like probably the Seek One guys do that's popular on YouTube of hunting door to door in these neighborhoods, you know, and kind of these backdoor bucks, so to speak. And I was surprised that out of the 5 farmers that we called, 3 of them gave us permission.
Yeah.
And I remember the number one thing, for free, not a single dime. They said, absolutely, drive up here. Now, this is landline phone, no cell phones, no emails, no internet.
No.
We didn't have a clue of the topography of the ground. We didn't even know if there was deer in it. We just knew it was Pike County, Illinois. That's what I'd been reading about, you writing about,
yes.
and Greg Miller, and, you know, I can go on with my mentors and people like you. So we go up there, and I remember the first thing the farmer said, like, all right, how many deer y'all plan on killing? And I remember I said, I got a doe. I think I had a doe and a buck tag. And they said, look, you ain't here. I ain't here because they told me and my buddy Shane, like, we ain't got you here because we like you. We got you here to kill deer. You kill all you can. And I remember thinking, I'm going to come to Illinois and poach. And I remember one of the places we got kicked off because I'm excited. I saw a nice young 120-inch 8-pointer, which was right on the edge. I was just wanting a 125-inch deer.
Right.
And that farmer, I told him about it. He said, did you shoot him? I said, no, sir. And later he said, he was mad. He's like,
yes.
Y'all been up here for 3 days and ain't shot a deer? He said, I could have done killed. He said, yeah, they're eating my beans. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, that was the days of free, hunting Pike County, Illinois for free. Somewhere along the line, this guy put no value on this whitetail deer. So guess what? All the young people, all the old timers in the area, they had plenty of free hunting property. But the wildlife wasn't as big then as it was now because of the fact that farmer finally said, wait a minute. I let them old boys used to come hunt Georgia, kill them all. Now let me, you know what? I'll plant some corn just for them. I got somebody to give me $10,000 to come hunt my 500-acre farm. And that offset the cost. And so that's what happened. So as soon as they become a value, so there's a catch-22 in there.
There is.
So the free days, they were good for a broke redneck from Georgia who drove to Illinois in a little old 4-cylinder Toyota truck and happy as a lark. I knew we were redneck because my buddy, we went to the local taxidermist and they said, where are you hunting? I said, well, Mr. Johnson gave us permission. And I remember the guy said, man, there's some hogs in there. And my buddy said, can we shoot them too? He was talking about big hog deer.
Oh, absolutely.
And anyway, at the end of the day, I do feel the pain. I've experienced it. I still do experience it. And
same here.
But I don't think it's hurting our wildlife. And I hear a lot of conversation about the baiting and the farm deer and this, that, and you shouldn't be allowed to do this, shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I really don't dip my toe in it too much because I feel like I don't know, man. It's almost narcissist and communist to tell somebody how you have to do it, especially when you can't prove the wildlife is suffering. I don't know.
You're exactly right. When it comes to wildlife conservation, when it comes to hunting, there used to be a back when newspapers had a comic section.
Yeah.
There was one called Opus, and the Opus was a opossum, and they were having some problems with all the different animals in this little swamp area. And his statement was something to the effect, I've seen the enemy, and it is us. And what you kind of relate there to is that, they're guys who shoot longbows, who don't like crossbows, who don't like compound bows, who don't like this, and I don't want to have anything to do with this guy. Hey, guys, we're all in this together. As long as it's legal, ethics is something everybody controls within themselves. What's ethical to me may not be ethical to somebody else and vice versa kind of thing. But we're all in this together. So I don't care how you hunt, whether you hunt with dogs, whether you don't hunt with dogs, whether you hunt over bait, if you hunt with a spear, I don't care how you hunt.
Me either.
We're in this together. And that's one of the things I appreciated with you is watching you over the years. I remember when you shot one of the first deer that I saw you shoot with a rifle. You shot it with my rifle.
I borrowed your rifle
on the Encinitas on a really good buck, running like crazy. Made one heck of a shot.
I get more comments on that. I borrowed your gun.
You did.
I'd been bow hunting. I remember you told me, said, Michael, the hunting's tough, buddy. Let me introduce you to what you need to tote.
Yeah.
And I think it was a 300 mag you gave me, and I'm like, thank you, Larry.
Single shot.
It is so crazy to look at all that. And I think, again, it's always certainly just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm a psychologist and got people nailed, but a lot of the people I see complain the most about that, whether it's a compound, whether it's you shouldn't bait, or man, baiting has ruined this state or whatever. All right, which I do want to let that kind of go into CWD.
Right.
Because I definitely want to get your take on what's going on around the country with that. But what I've noticed is if you really dissect their conversation, they're really thinking, I don't want you competing with me. I might even do some of the same things, but I don't want this to be elevated in price because I'm going to have to do this if you do this. And if you do this, it makes it better or easier for you to do it. And I might not get it. And I see that argument with the turkey hunters who get mad over decoys and stuff like that. They're still doing what they do. They're just aggravated that you have some competition. Well, I'm sure Chipper Jones was pissed off that these pitchers coming out of the Dominican Republic was throwing curveballs that was nasty as Greg Maddux. And they're like, now I got to figure out how to hit these guys. Yeah. But it's the evolution of the competition in the world. So therefore, the world don't stay still for you. I'm sure
it's dynamic. It's ever changing.
It's ever changing. I remember reading things. I was always a guitar guy. I love guitars. And there was a lot of really good guitar players that hated Eddie Van Halen because like, what is he doing? All that racking finger tapping. But then you listen to it and you're like, how is he doing?
Yes.
He took a guitar, or the Chet Atkins in these times actually got some criticism because like, that's not the way a guitar is supposed to be played, but he's probably one of the best acoustical instrumentalists ever lived. Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix. So does that really connect to what I'm saying here? All I'm saying is whatever you're in, you're always going to have competition. Some of that could be financial. Some of it is that my neighbor just bought 200 acres beside me. He's got a lot of money. He ain't going to outbait me, but he can't out. But he's got 4 tractors. I might have one, and he is going to plant the whole thing in peanuts, that he's got open space. So he's going to be sucking deer. So do I go try to pass a bill to say, well, this guy moved in next door to me and bought 4 John Deere tractors and planted all 200 acres in peanuts? That's cheating, dude. I can't do that. If you really listen to yourself, you sound like a little poor child, pitiful child.
It does
and sometimes they win. You either win or lose. Maybe if that's the case, if it brings that much unpleasure, buy a pontoon boat and go tubing, I think. Really, I know some people are going to listen to this and clip this out and make me sound like an asshole. But at the end of the day, I get it. I lived it. I didn't grow. I met you, and I went 3 or 4 years, didn't even shoot a buck because I'm videoing, toting those beta cams around. Right. Come back home to Booger Bottom. We had literally 500 acres that we were leasing, and my dad was making me put $500 in the hat. And there was not a mature buck. I'm on God honest truth, Larry. I would come back from Encinitas seeing all these big deer and stuff and my adventures with all these people I looked up to, knowing when I got home, there wasn't trail cameras, but I was smart enough through the evolution of where I took and the people I was around, talking to people like you, Greg Miller, Jim Shockey, all these guys, and of course, and I realized I'm going to go home, probably shoot me a doe. I might get a 100-inch 8-pointer. These deer that I now want to kill do not live on this piece of property. And it almost become a little bit saddening and depressing when I realized that. But I still had the best time hunting with my dad.
Oh my gosh,
and wouldn't get one. And so my point is, it's all in your attitude. And so some of these people come across very narcissistic in the way they approach it. They really just want them to have that opportunity and really not the neighbor. And I get it. But at the end of the day, somewhere you got to meet in the middle, I think. So I didn't even mean to get off on that subject. But
well, I think it's important that we do sometimes, and for a lot of different reasons as well. You mentioned the CWD thing, and I look at things a little bit differently, I think. My background is I started out as a wildlife disease specialist, where we dealt with I worked with the Department of Veterinary Pathology at Texas A&M University, and we dealt with all kinds of different diseases. Back then, CWD was not one of them. CWD kind of did come about probably now, almost 50 years ago, when they first really realized it in a breeding operation, if you will, that was done in the northeast corner of Colorado on elk. And that's when they first started seeing it, or so they think. Because if you go back and look at some of the talking about histological slides, where you cut a piece of an organ and very thin and look at it underneath the microscope. And CWD is basically a prion. It's a protein that you can't hardly kill it. But CWD probably has been one of those things that we've had for a long, long time. We were talking about the economic value of deer. Well, there was a time years ago when if you were out here in Georgia or in Texas or you mentioned the state, and a deer died, he's like, oh yeah, deer died. No big
Might
deal.
have celebrated it because there's a lot of corn and soybeans around
exactly.
here. Yeah.
So, but then when we started looking at the economic value started increasing on the hunting opportunities, that's all of a sudden a deer died and goes, oh my God, a deer died. That could have been taken by a hunter. Maybe I could have made some money because of it. So I think some of the attitude had a whole lot to do with what we're seeing now with the CWD thing. I really feel like it's been something that's been here forever. It didn't just appear. Mm-hmm. But things have really changed in terms of how we look at wildlife, in terms of the economic value. And if something dies, we got to figure out what it is. And, oh my God, it's this kind of thing. We've seen kind of an evolution in a lot of different ways with the CWD thing. It's prevalent in a lot of different areas. In some areas where there were breeder operations. And one of the things that we do know is that if you concentrate genes for, say, like antlers, and I used to get tickled because guys would grow these really big bucks in breeding operation. They're like, they're on steroids. We tried all that years ago to see steroids will grow this big bodied deer, and little bitty set of antlers. So it's not steroids. It's genetics of line breeding and very intense line breeding, and then of course nutrition as well too. But anytime when you do that, when you concentrate genes for one or two characteristics, it opens the door for a lot of things to happen. And I think that was a part of what we're dealing with the CWD thing now. And then people were, oh my God, I want the biggest buck possible. I don't want to wait 5 years to grow them. I want them now. So they were going out and buying deer and putting them in, relocating them in a lot of places. And I think in the process of that, some of those deer did have the CWD prion. And so we disseminated over a much larger area. Now, there are some areas where, too, there's an area in New Mexico that there's no breeder operations where it's very prevalent in mule deer. Generally, it doesn't show itself in an animal until it's 3, 4, 5 years of age. That is probably a good thing if that, in certain areas, because we still got animals.
Right.
They're going to reproduce and all those kind of things. To me, the CWD thing is something that we need to do even more research on where we can. And I think there's been a bill that's been passed through Congress or is in the process of being passed that provides research money that we'll learn a little bit more about. And a lot of the states have restricted the movement of deer from breeder operations to just disseminating it in an open area kind of thing. I think that's a very important thing for people to stay on top of as well too. But from a disease perspective, we were talking about blue tongue earlier, or EHD, and how a huge amount of deer died. Not all of them died. Mm-hmm. Mother Nature, in the work that we did, and being able to go back and even look at some of the tissues and things that were preserved from very early on at the Smithsonian Institute, we were able to look at some of there's never been a disease process in humans or in animals that has totally wiped out a population. Mother Nature, God, forever will place individuals within herd or population that are either immune to or resistant to different things. And so in these areas where they went in and wholesalely just tried to wipe out the deer population, to me if that does exist, and I cannot believe that it doesn't because I've seen it happen too many other times with other diseases, they may have wiped out those 6 or 8 animals that were in that 1,000 animal herd that could have been the savior to all this. So to me, you're taking the wrong approach when you go in and try to wholesalely, just kill these animals out. So, because it happens by contact,
right?
This kind of contact. And so to me, it's better to take a common sense approach to that thing, and let's isolate those areas where we can, and not just go in and wholesalely kill animals like they were doing for a while. There's no doubt in my mind that, again, going back to looking at other disease processes over the years from way back when, that CWD will kill out the white-tailed deer. It may have an effect on them, and in certain areas it has. but it's not going to kill out the white-tailed deer.
We're just getting started. Hold on. We got a little bit more coming after this.
Spandau Arms was founded with a simple idea. The best part of hunting isn't the gear, it's the memories. From the first rooster rise of the season in the tall grass to the last second opportunity on the target buck as sunset closes in. Spandau believes firearms should be built to perform, priced to be accessible, and designed to become an essential piece of your hunting story. Their lineup includes field-ready shotguns and precision-driven rifles built for hunters, competitors, and recreational shooters who know that quality and dependability matter more than the hype. Born from the experience of American hunters and crafted by generations of gunmakers, each Spandau firearm is built for real-world performance in the moments that matter.
You know, that was very well put, Larry, first of all, because that brings up a whole nother situation. I think a lot of people don't have possibly the foresight to see, is the fact that if you look from humans to, I mean, even if people want to go back archaeology-wise and look at dinosaurs, it wasn't a disease.
No.
It was some catastrophic event, if you even are a believer in dinosaurs, you know, whatever. But whatever it is, when you look at these species, it was either a true environmental disaster. It never was a disease. I mean, if you think about what our ancestors survived, I mean, smallpox, malaria,
cholera,
leprosy.
You can go down the list of all the human diseases, and it may have wiped out a small portion, maybe a little town or something like that. But most of the time that didn't even happen. You know, even during the times when the smallpox thing was really, really bad, it was really rampant through the indigenous people, through the various Indian tribes. But it didn't kill out and totally kill out the Indian tribes.
Once they got resistance.
There were some individuals that were either immune to or resistant to it.
See, that makes the most sense. It still certainly has a brutal evolution of survival through it, just like we talk about Northeast Montana at EHD.
Mother Nature is a bitch.
It's mean, boy.
You know, it really is. It's mean. It's not a Disneyite type thing that people like to think. Mother Nature is cruel.
It's not a polar bear drinking a Coca-Cola laid up.
No.
See, that to me makes sense. And I remember when I first heard about it, I think it was one state in particular, they were just pretty much put a bounty out and was killing every deer.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, man,
handing out tags like,
that doesn't seem common sense.
It was just counterintuitive to what really should have been going on.
And there is always conspiracy theories. Is it possible, Larry, or have you ever seen it? Could be an unfair question to ask. Is there any financial possibility for a certain state to get incentivized by the government on a situation like that? Or is that preposterous?
Yes and no. Because you look at some of these, I'm going to pick on the car insurance people.
Yes, the lobbyists around.
The lobbyists around,
They certainly are still with the farmers. They want them all dead, I would assume.
If there were no car accidents with wildlife, guess how much money they would save. So to me, I can't help but feel like there is some of that got involved in some of those areas, particularly because some of the areas where they really went in and shot the deer out, there were a lot of deer car accident kind of thing. And when they shot them all out, well, that kind of reduced that number.
In a world of analytics and statistics, they can say, we're losing a lot of money up here in certain parts of Michigan and Pennsylvania. Maybe we need to adjust this.
So to me, that certainly had some play in it, whether it's above the table or below the table.
Well, there's corruption at every level, and that's one thing
we're starting to see more.
We're starting to see. I mean, look at what happened with the Leering centers in, Minneapolis, and now we're starting to realize, I'm sure at every level where there's a dollar and where there's fraud at the government level, there's somebody, call it a lobbyist, call it a politician, call it somebody that says, hey, wait a minute, dude, if we can do this, this, and this, and then we can
monetize.
That's killing these deer could possibly worth millions of dollars. I mean,
I think there had to be some of that went on in some of those areas, and I think some of that kind of passed, hopefully, and hopefully more and more people will take a common sense approach to all this stuff with CWD. Do I think we should not be moving deer from one area to another? yes. Or if we move them, they should be
Yeah.
very, very obviously marked with big ear tags, freeze branded, or something to where you can determine and know exactly where those animals go. That's one thing that Texas, I think, is looking at more so now than they have in the past, and I applaud them for doing so. But also with the breeder programs, there is the chance that they may be able to breed a deer that is resistant to it. So that's a possibility. That's to me is the positive side of it, but it still needs to be controlled where you can't just wholesalely go out and
there's never been, to my knowledge, any damage to a human, even because there's no way there hadn't been people that has eaten.
And I'll interrupt
we've
you
eaten
there.
CWD. We probably never knew it.
I'm sure we probably have. It started in that very northeast corner in a research area of Colorado, and if it were affecting humans as that got out, it would be the guys who take the guides. They're the ones who are going in and skinning the animals, cutting the lymph nodes where those things can be found, and the spinal fluid and all that kind of stuff, cutting off heads. The guys who are processing the meat, doing the same thing, taxidermists who dealt with these, there's never been any kind of authenticated case of somebody dying or being debilitated because of something that could be something similar to or related to wildlife with CWD.
All of it, to me, makes sense. One thing I've always admired about you being a wildlife biologist and your knowledge, is the common sense that you brought to it. I've talked to a lot of different biologists across the country. Sometimes, to be honest, and I've hit my head against the wall. It's like, I know I didn't go to school, but I spent every hour out there, and I'm just reporting what I saw. I don't know why. And then they'll sometimes say, well, no, that don't happen. I'm like, no, I saw it. Matter of fact, here's the video. And
exactly.
And I've always loved about you because it's so many times I've sat around a fire at the Encinitas. One particular time that to me created Realtree road trips back in the day was me and you, Mark Chestnut, sitting around.
Oh, yeah.
I think we had a little bottle of Jim Beam and we were just sitting there talking, and none of us, to I remember, got to the point where it was breakdancing. Because if I were to see Larry Weishuhn in his cowboy hat breakdancing, okay, we need to get into bed. Maybe he got overserved. But in this case, we talked about everything under the sun, played some Hank Jr., and, of course, Mark played his hits. And I remember thinking, this is hunting camp here.
That was hunting camp. That is hunting camp.
But the knowledge you gave in a layman's term of common sense logic, and you combine that with true academia of study and your predecessors and research, and even call it, maybe it is the nerdy side of things, to where the data and the prions and the proteins and the whatever the label of this bug or fly or disease is, but then you apply that to the country boy wisdom. That's why you and even Dr. Kroll have always been my favorite. Like, I'll be arguing with somebody who's like, nope, that ain't what Larry says, and that ain't what Dr. Kroll says, so you're an idiot. That's probably not fair to you, because I'm like y'all's biggest fans out there.
Well, I appreciate it, and I know James does as well too. But you're right. I was very fortunate. I worked with a gentleman named Dr. R.M. Mick Robinson when I first went to work with wildlife diseases. And Dr. Robinson had this unique ability to sit down with a guy who had a third grade education, sit down on a stump with him, and would explain to him the most complicated disease process that you could ever imagine, to where that guy, and he would use terms that guy could relate to.
Yeah.
And when it was all said and done, that guy knew everything there was about it, but he told it to him in a way that he could understand, and using descriptive terms and all that. The other thing I used to get tickled at years ago is as a wildlife biologist, a lot of time they would send the young biologists with me that just going to work for the state. And I always took them to several old ranchers that I knew, and because they had a lot of experience and all this kind of stuff, and we'd go and the young biologist was nice. He'd just sit there and listen, and we'd get back in the vehicle, we're driving down the road, and he'd go, "What does that old son bitch know? He didn't have a degree." And I go, "That old SOB has been living on this land for 70 plus years. He's made a living here. What he's told you is that what he has observed." And he's observed, and he has learned, and he has practiced, and he's put what he's learned into practices to improve what he has. I said, you would do well to listen to that old man and learn from him. And some of them did, and some didn't.
Well, that's the same old man that's probably living in that same wolf habitat, say up in Colorado somewhere, where they released them to where you certainly got to have some smart and probably in their right mind, thinking they're doing the right thing in preservation, which
Right.
You're right. There's a difference in conservation in that. That's the first way I've ever heard that. And I thought that was really elegantly put. But this old man can tell you what these wolves are truly doing.
Absolutely.
They can truly tell you, this is a bigger wolf than I experienced.
Yeah, these
They're
are not
faster.
the wolves that my granddad and granddad took out of this country.
Exactly. And so he's out there living it. And he might not be a biologist, might even be a hunter, but he can tell you. And I think sometimes
lived it.
we overlook listening to we can read so, it's almost like the same as of a Bible, the people are an atheist who don't believe in God. I think sometimes you can get so intellectually smart in your own mind that maybe that's the trick the devil plays on us, to where
He does.
You're so intelligent that you can't just trust in faith and trust in just the standard, just gentleman over here. No, I have went to Yale, and all of a sudden you just overlooking and you become dumb with your richness of intellect.
You do.
And the intellect can make you stupid if you ain't careful. And that's somewhat of a tongue twister and a deep thought to think of, but you see it all the time.
You do.
On a lot of different levels of different things.
On a lot of different levels, in a lot of different arenas, and a lot of different professions as well too. So
We're proving in the pharmaceutical world, they're starting to kind of get back to going right along with a certainly educated Texan and Larry Weishuhn to say, find me a disease that's wiped out everything. You certainly can find some crazy hardships on wildlife and humans.
You can,
but you
in
survive.
little isolated areas, but truly, truly isolated. But again, there's never been a disease process that wiped out a population, whether it's human or animal, or fish, or bird, or I'm talking about terrestrial animals when I say animals, So we need, again, all those kind of things you need to take common sense approach to.
It does, and keep in mind, I'm almost certain that I can put my paycheck on the fact it wasn't a Harvard professor that come up with the saying, what don't kill you makes you stronger. I guarantee you the guy probably drank out of a water tank in Texas and was probably trying to wrestle out longhorns or some Angus and trying to get prickly pear out of his boots and escape rattlesnakes and a coyote getting into his knapsack or something. I don't know.
I think you're exactly right.
I find it really intriguing, and I know we've been talking for a while. There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. One is you'll be at the Dallas Safari Club here coming up.
I will.
When is that? And will you be at the show the whole time?
Sheets. I have been involved with Dallas Safari Club since 1987. In one form or fashion, they have graciously sponsored anything I've ever asked them to do, but I've also given back a lot in those respects. You were at last year's Atlanta show, and it was an interesting show. It was in January. It was during the freeze out of the South.
Oh, my goodness, it was cold.
All these people that had been promised me to come to DSC from the Southeast called me, sent me text, or I called them and said, where are you? And they said, I can't get out of my driveway. Well, guess what? Because of things happening in Dallas with the convention center, we had to leave Dallas, and we chose to go to Atlanta. And we'll be back for the DSC convention. I think I can't remember,
I thought I saw February
years?
6th, 7th, and 8th. I think
February
it is.
6th, 7th, and 8th.
So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Friday,
Because we're going to try
Saturday,
to get up
Sunday.
there. I think we're going to come in Thursday night, bring my family and a little boy. And I don't know, it's in my backyard, basically.
Well, it is, and you were there as a speaker last year, and a great hit, and we really appreciate
thank you.
you being there. And like I said, I'm thrilled that you're going to be there. I got a few cheat notes I need to tell you about that.
Oh, heck
convention,
yeah.
though.
Tell us about it. In the meantime, I appreciate these books you gave me, man.
Those are
exciting.
Two of those are books that I did with Luke Clayton. Luke and I have been doing radio shows together and all kinds of other things together for about 20 years. And one of them is called
I like that. The hog on the hunt, poor man's grizzly.
Poor Man's
I
Grizzly.
love that. That's going to be my first one.
Then, and the deer book is pretty much about hunting deer across North America. I'm working on one right now that's going to be called. I've been hunting deer a long time, and this year will probably be the 75th year that I've hunted deer, because I started hunting with my dad when I was like 3 years old. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 5 or 6. Well, there's 4, and he started putting me on my deer stand by myself and leaving me with a single shot 22. a Remington Model 33, the first bolt action that Remington ever made. But
getting after it.
Looking back at DSC, and we'll be telling all kinds of stories there as well too. I've been involved with DSC, like I said, for so many years. To me, it is the finest conservation hunter organization, almost totally composed of volunteers. The show that's being put on there and at the World Congress Center we'll have. We call it our DSC 100 of the volunteers, but actually it's more like 500 or 600 volunteers.
Right.
But this year we're going to be back here and we're going to have over 1,300 booths. Now these booths are from outfitters, hunting equipment, all over the world. And the beauty of those booths is the people that are there. Everyone's been vetted. If you go to talk to somebody and tells you about a product or he tells you about a hunting trip, fishing trip, camping trip, whatever, you can take it to the bank because somebody from DSC, and generally more than one person, has hunted, fished with this guy. So you're dealing with the best that's there. But, I mean, we'll have a whole lot of guys there as well, too, with the different gun companies and optic companies. Hornady will be there, I know.
Oh, yeah. Steve and Jason
I
and
was
the
with
boys,
Steve last week on a buffalo hunt on the Choctaw Hunting Lodge. So we were talking about some of the plans for being there in February. But like I said, February 6th, 7th, and 8th, we're going to have guest speakers. Thursday night, you're going to be there. Shane Mahoney is going to be the guest speaker. And
I know Shane.
And then, too,
Yeah,
each night we have a lot of different auctions. And on Friday night, now Donald Trump Jr. has been very gracious and his team of being very much involved with DSC. And on Friday night, we're doing a hunt that Donald Jr. is going to be there to auction off for us as well, too.
Nice,
But
nice.
Got some great speakers. There's seminars going on. There's a lot of people on the floor, all those kind of things. Some of the special guests now will be you, of course, since you're out here, you're coming. But also Johnny Morris with Bass Pro and Richard Childress.
Oh, man.
You know
Love
Richard
both
as
those
well,
guys.
too. And then
Childress is a mess.
There's another guy named Rob Keck. And, of course, I mentioned Steve Hornady is going to be there. And then usually we have quite a few ambassadors from different countries and companies, but ambassadors from all kinds of countries all over the world. Not unusual to have U.S. senators and U.S. House representatives and a lot of politicians there that know a little bit about hunting and like hunting and want to be around people for a change, possibly,
right,
to where they can actually kind of kick back a little bit. Hey, let me tell you about that fish or that 8-point buck.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
Those guys are going to be there, but one of the things I like about DSC too, our convention, there's something for everybody. Now, you were there last year and you brought your beautiful wife, Christy, with you. And I remember seeing a video clip of Christy trying on a...
yeah, that was my only gripe, which will encourage the ladies to come because, you know, in my mind, we're going to go up there. I took our producer, Cohen Stone. We're just going to kick it around and go spend a couple hours. Well, the first thing we find is multiple fur jacket booths, which obviously majority of my time was monopolized by my wife. Said, "Oh, we're going to get
one of these, trying to get in between."
And we did leave with one. We did leave with a fur jacket, and that cut into our Applebee's budget on the way out. So,
but you know, we also have a lot of things going on for kids. That's one of the things we pride ourselves on is the family aspect of all these.
Yeah.
And with having it Saturday and Sunday as well, a lot of times the first day we have a lot of guys come in, and that's when they'll buy their hunts before anybody else gets there or their fishing trip. But Saturday and Sunday we have a lot of things going on that really of interest to the kids. And this year, starting Friday, and I'm thrilled that Waylon's coming with you. I mean,
Waylon loved it last year, seeing all the mounts.
We're going to make sure well, that's true too, because we have so many different mounts from all over the world and so many such great people involved that are there behind the booth. This year we got a deal going on particularly for the kids, and I need to look at this so I get it right, but it's called a Passport to Adventure. It says an exciting youth engagement initiative designed to inspire the next generation of outdoor enthusiasts. The interactive activity of the convention floor encourages young attendees and their families to visit our exhibitor partners, explore the outdoors, and earn rewards along the way. Every participant who completes their passport receives a complimentary 1-year youth DSC membership. But they'll also be involved in several drawings where we're going to be giving away different kids giving away different. You hear that, parents? If there's one of those two kids that you don't like that much, well, no,
don't sign it up for husbands. Chris will be the first to auction me off. I promise you.
But I mean, so we've got that going on, and then too this year on an hourly basis, we've got a attendee giveaway program to where there's going to be a prize announced every hour of the entire show. And all you have to do is just to be there, but you do have to be there so that when they do it, and they'll probably do it I'm guessing like 2:00 in the afternoon kind of thing, to where
I got you.
Where everybody's still there, and by then most of the people that are going to come, we get a lot of people though, I guess, that come in after lunch as well too. There's so many booths, there's so many things to see. If there's any way to be there all 3 days, you really ought to be there all 3 days, and. But if you can't, gosh, we'd love to have whoever.
It's a fun event.
It is.
I had a blast. I've been over the years. I've been when it was in Dallas. I've been to most all the shows that's even similar to this, and I really enjoyed that. But one thing I want to do, because I know we're kind of wrapping up now, and like I said, if you get a chance to run by and get you a ticket, come see the Safari Club, man, it's going to be a big old fun celebration. But anything else you want to mention?
Well, the only thing that I'll mention as well too is. DSC is run pretty much by volunteerism. I do want to mention a little bit about the chapters a little bit, but we do have auctions every night. There's raffles going on during the daytime, silent auction stuff going on as well. But the hunts that we auction off at night and the fishing trips, we'd love for somebody to be there. But if they can't be there, they can bid on them online.
So it is online bidding.
Huntingauctions.com.
And all the proceeds, that's what goes to all these conservation efforts.
That goes to the conservation efforts.
And y'all spend a lot in America too.
Well, we do. We spend probably the vast majority of the dollars that DSC raises, and the DSC Foundation raises as well too, are spent on extremely well-vetted projects here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And then you and I were talking earlier yesterday, there's some projects that we support in some of the other countries, but there's a reason for them. It's not just for research purposes. All of our, again, every project that DSC funds, and like through the DSC Foundation this past year, 2025, we probably gave away, I can't remember the exact figure, but I want to say we provided like $1.25 million to different wildlife-oriented projects. And of course, DSC is conservation, education, and to a lesser point, advocacy, although we have lobbyists in Washington, D.C. and a lot of other places kind of thing. But this is a great opportunity to come. There's so many other things on this list that I'm not going to mention beyond the banquets and the life membership breakfasts that we have and all those kind of things, but just the number of booths, 1,300, the finest booths in the world in terms of hunting equipment and fishing and anything having to do with the outdoors. And,
right.
And the doors are going to be open. I think they open probably about 9 o'clock every morning, and I don't see it on here, but I do for a fact. Friday and Saturday, it's from 9 a.m. to 5:30. Sunday, it is from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Okay.
So, you can come in, you can buy a day pass when you get there. You can also learn more about, if you want to go online, you can go to biggame.org and learn more about the passes and that kind of thing as well too, and learn more about DSC as well.
That's cool, man. I hope people go check it out. It's, like I said, it's a fun show. And there was one final question I was going to ask you, Larry, before we got out of here, and it kind of goes good from talking about Dallas Safari Club to where you at. What's probably, in your opinion, the one thing or the things that could make or break hunting into the future, or as far as where are we at right now, in your opinion?
I'm kind of happy where we are right now, kind of. I would love to see us spend a little bit more dollars on education, on making people aware how important hunting is. And when you get right down to it, the saving grace is letting people know, of getting people involved. We do it through our DSC chapters, which the interesting thing about those is DSC is the only organization that has chapters across North America where 95% of the dollars that they raise at their best fundraiser, they determine where it goes. Mm-hmm. Only 5% of it goes to DSC. So they keep 75%, 20% goes to the foundation, but they tell the foundation where it goes. And there are chapters all over, and you can go to biggame.org to find out where the nearest chapter is, kind of thing. But it comes down to getting involved, and that's where I was going with that, is become involved. if you get an opportunity, go listen to some of what the teachers are teaching your kids in school about conservation. You know, are they very anti-hunting, very anti-gun, all those kind of things? Find out, and then explain to your kids that maybe it's not quite this way. I think education is so very important, and that's where we need to dwell on to get that guy that lives in an apartment on the 15th floor of a city building to realize that, hey, he can be a contributor too. One of the things I tell people is if you've got a garden, if you got a backyard, if you got a little portal in the back where you got a flower, if you got a flower back there, guess what? You can be a wildlife contributor because of the insect kind of thing there. But I think I feel good about hunting. I feel like hunting will always be here. It's going to change somewhat. We're reducing habitat in so many areas because of human habitation. That means that we're going to have to more wisely conserve, more wisely manage the habitat that remains. And through organizations such as DSC, which is Conservation Education, we can do so much, and it's why people need to be more involved with organizations such as DSC, and there's some other good organizations out there. I just happen to think after 40 years of messing with DSC and seeing what they've done and where they've come from and where we're going, that it just happens to be the very best. And again, I'd personally love to invite people to come out to Georgia, and if you're in that part of the world, come by and see us those days in February 6th, 7th, and 8th, and you're going to be there part of the time. I'm going to be there the entire time. I've got several.
Yeah, I'll be there for sure. That one day I was talking about it last night. I think we had a good time last year, so we just going to up and take in.
We're going to make
kick
sure
around, walk the shows.
We're going to make sure that you have such a good time this year that next year you're going to say, "Wait a minute, we're going to block out Christy. We're going to DSC these days."
Exactly, Larry. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Before you do get out of here, I do want to. I got my humidor down here, so we're getting to wear an annual, or not an annual, but every time a guest comes in, pick you out a couple fine cigars. Cigars International keeps us supplied up, and I don't have the proper ventilation right now in the podcast room. We get to the point we might have to puff on an old stogie.
You know, I saw some wood piled up out there. I think a campfire with a good cigar would be very appropriate.
Man, and that will happen. It's happened with us in the past, and it's been way too long. So we not only, I'll see it at the Dallas Safari Club, but I'll also see it. We got to get together and do a hunt, man. Maybe we get on a turkey hunt where you're going to shoot.
Yeah, maybe I can actually have a gun that shoots and goes off when I pull the trigger this time.
That's right.
That'd be a novelty.
Larry, speaking of that cigar I was talking about, I'm going to go ahead and pick you one out here. One of my favorites right here. Hard to beat that one. If you go to Cigar International, man, you can find anything and everything you would want. But from humidors to a little bit of everything, but I might have to get me one out. Maybe we can enjoy one before we get out of here.
Thank you.
Larry Weishuhn, thank you, buddy. Thank you for the friendship and just the many years and all you've done for the hunting industry, buddy.
Michael, thank you. What a true honor and pleasure it's been to spend time with you.
That was fun, man.